Hey there, everyone. A little bit of soothing music, and it's really completely the opposite of two of the most energetic people that you'll ever put into the same little virtual studio, but that's okay. A little calm is good. So in the house, you've got me here, Laurelyn Mears, founder of STEERus, part of the STEERus Weekly Grind virtual coffee chat about the future of work and all kinds of cool stuff. And Andy Greider, one of the most amazing people who is very generous with his time, his connections. He is considered a universal dot connector. He's a podcast host like I am of Unique This Week, and I had the pleasure of being on his show, I guess about a month or so ago. And he's also co-founding member of Domestic Growth Capital, which is a really cool way of basically finding money that you're already spending as a large company. It's like, why are you paying all that in health insurance or whatever else? Here's found money, use it in a different way and invest it. So Andy, welcome.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me here. And secondly, would you like a job? Because I think I could have you as my PR person too.
Well, I can be a hype girl.
What an absolutely beautiful introduction. And quite frankly, you're right. The music wasn't quite, I guess, calm before the storm, right? There we go.
Well,
all right, so let's rock and roll. All right.
Yeah, well, we're just going to dive right into it. So with this whole thing, just given the enormity of your network and all of the clients that you're working with, some really large enterprise companies, you are seeing all kinds of things. And of course, there's the struggles going on. We know offshore, and our hearts go out to everybody there, but we're going to keep it inshore here, and the struggles that companies and employers and employees, I should say, are facing here. What are you seeing?
Laurelyn, that's a great question. And it is hard to think about things inshore when everything else is going on outside of the world. But we do still have to keep focused on what's going on here as well, while trying to help where we can. So with that in mind, what I would say I see happening in most corporate atmospheres all the way down to mom and pops is this buy-in to what I will consider a myth of the war for talent. I don't think it's a war for talent. I think it's a battle for talent. And I think the war is actually for culture. So you can win the battle and lose the war. And right now there's a really big reset button sitting there that allows for companies to go in and make changes that are tantamount and large and sweeping. And employees not only are expecting it, they actually want it if you're making the right changes. And so right now, to me, that war for culture is really the key. And if you can do that out of found money, you mentioned it earlier, that's even better. But the long story short is what we see time and time again is if these companies aren't being proactive now, they're going to end up being reactive later. And it'll be, in many cases, a little too late. We've already seen what happened with the Great Resignation. And I'll end at this little bit by saying, companies need to position right now for 2, 6, 8, 10 years from now to being a company of choice on down the line by playing to the values and the wants of the people they want to attract and bring in on as a corporate entity, social responsibility wise, carbon impact wise, culture wise, whatever else it is. And everybody's big question is always, how do I do that? So we see that a lot.
And do you think that that's something that's not really accessible to the smaller to mid-sized companies, that what you're describing? It's like, what's our big vision, right? How do we want to change the world? We'll build our corporate sustainability dollars. We'll become a certified B corporation. What about kind of everybody else? Like, that's only a small niche of companies.
Sure, it is. And I mean, we do some work at that level. We also do work with smaller companies. And I think for a lot of them, the key is figuring out what matters to you and then living it. It's being an authentic company and then figuring out what tools are available to a smaller company to help attract the talent they want. It's not just offering a higher salary. It's not just offering benefits per se. everybody can claim, oh, we've got excellent benefits. Well, compared to what? Okay. I mean, there's a lot of differentiation in that world of we have the best benefits, or we have benefits that you're going to love. Well, how do you know that? Well, you know that by establishing a culture and establishing a group of people that have told you what they want. So we partner up with a lot of folks that help figure that out too. And I think that's another key that a lot of these smaller companies think they can't do. They can't afford to bring on 3 and 4 and 5 companies to figure things out. But realistically, they can't afford not to either, because it's not expensive to do, but it's very important to do. So hooking things together, for instance, what you do with what Interaction does, with what a Prosper Bridge does, with what other groups do, especially when you can do it in a way that there's zero net cost to it, and you're paying for some of it out of found money. There's a lot of tools out there, Laura Lynn. And I think one of the last pieces I'll say about it right now is it's humility of being able to say, I don't know everything and I need some help. And that's the biggest problem I see for most. I don't care if you're a corporate CFO at the Fortune 50 level, all the way down to somebody who's running a family business and wearing 14 hats, and one of them happens to be CFO. Everybody has that problem of, I guess, accepting the help or accepting the fact that they're not supposed to know everything. And so that's the other thing we're seeing a lot, is a lot of people either get out of their own way and realize that that's not that important and it's better to get the help, or they get in their own way and they get left in the wake beside the boat. So that's what we're seeing.
We have a lot of those similar conversations too, where
Sure.
I speak to many founders, like founder to founder, like, hey, you're bootstrapped. How about me? What's on fire for you today? Oh, 9 things. Oh, pretty good. I'm at like 11 things today. Great. So, instant bonding there.
Yeah.
And then, but like to your point, we're also talking to these chief people officers, executives in HR, learning and development, and they've got a lot of fires burning too.
Yeah.
And it's right. And it's like, oh, so-and-so has left now. Oh, they were, the keys to the kingdom on this one. Oh, we're having a changeover at the top. Oh, there's some cancel culture because so-and-so had, a few nasty things to say on Instagram, and we've recently unearthed those, right? All that stuff.
Yeah.
And so we're working with them, and even on the smaller companies, and saying it doesn't take $1 million to try to start driving change. With the benefit of a few $1,000s, you could have, like I said, one of our coaches, anybody's coaches, whoever you have that specialize in driving this cultural cohesion, and saying, here's some tips. Here's a framework that you can roll out and you can start to think about, and you can make it your own. Like, people try to always go to problem solving, to solution. Let's solution it so we can do this for 10 years. But oh my God, if the fire isn't put out in the next 3 to 6 months, there is no 10 years.
Right. Well, and that's kind of the point I was making earlier about there's that big reset button sitting right there right now. Normally, in a typical case, hitting that reset button is scary as hell. It is not something people want to do because they're upset about rocking the boat or upset about the status quo. There is no status quo right now. Everything's sideways still. And so here's your chance. Here's your chance to go in and ask the questions of the people you have that you think are your strongest players, that you want to sort of clone, emulate, reproduce, bring in people with similar values, similar visions, similar work ethics, etc., and work from there. To me, that's the biggest key. And then utilizing, companies like yours that understand how to teach the skills and how to get those things moving, and other things out there. And, you mentioned it, a couple $1,000s is. It can make all the difference in the world. And it's honestly, and this is the other, coming back to the point of people need to just ask, it's not that hard to find. There's a lot of programs out there that can save you, your company, your employees, a lot of time, frustration, energy, even money, whether that's corporate level, individual level, or in between, or both. So it's pretty key.
And it's through that combination too. Like, we've got our ecosystem of tech partners, where we've got the Great Reboot program. And of course, it sounds really good when you're Canadian, right? It's not like Great Reboot. I can't even say it in the American way. I don't know, reboot, like that's, but the Great Reboot program, or it's at the level of something that's more individualized. And I think that part of the challenge in the conversations we're having with these folks in learning and development and HR, all over the place, that they are inundated with options. And it used to be like, even when you think about like IT way back, like this is, like I'm old, right? So, okay, I'll put that out there. There you go. And it used to be before, like, bet on Blue, right? You never went wrong betting on IBM because they were the IT solution. Bet on Blue. It became a saying. And now, who do you bet on?
Yeah.
Big tech? I don't know.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
There's some stuff. I don't know.
Again, I think it's a really interesting dilemma that you bring up there, because there is a lot of chum in the water. And then there's sharks, and then there's dolphins, right? The dolphins are going to help you, the sharks are going to eat you, and how do you know which one's which until they crest, right?
They both have fins.
Yeah, exactly. They may seem similar even until suddenly they're sinking their teeth into you, or they're nudging you, one of the two, right? So I get the apprehension, I really do. So I think that companies that go after this kind of thing need to look at track record, need to look at, again, kind of what is it that my employees or my company needs. Another thing I was going to mention earlier, and I forgot to, is, I hear a lot of everybody from HR to CFOs, to COOs, to CEOs, company owners complaining about the Great Resignation as if it's a actual bad thing. And the honest to God truth is, it's a great thing. And here's why. Because if somebody's going to leave your company now, at this point, they were going to leave eventually in the future, most likely. So they're probably not somebody that has the mindset and the personality. They're meant to be an entrepreneur. They're meant to go out and give it a shot on their own. But chasing them and trying to get people that left to come back and things along those lines makes zero sense to me. And there's companies that are spending ludicrous amounts of money doing this. And it's a zero-sum game in the wrong direction. There is no real good return to you for doing it, because somebody who already left is likely to leave again once they realize that, hey, wow, I was right. This wasn't for me. Now, again, exceptions to every rule, but the rule will be what I said, and the exception will be what they think. They think that everybody's going to stick around once they come back. And it's like, it wasn't that good in the first place. One other thing I'll mention, Laurelyn, that I think is really key too, as it's a generational thing. And it's something I've seen, and I wonder if you would second this or not, is this whole concept of owed loyalty and job hopping and things like that. So quick conversation I had with the CEO, he said, well, in my day, I said, oh, thank you for that opening. Because in your day, when you came in, you could work a 40-hour week and provide for an entire family of 5, put 3 kids through college, and come home to a home that didn't need your attention per se, and other than maybe as a parent in the evenings. You weren't coming home to having to do everything with your spouse and like we do now. Secondly, you had healthcare and benefits that were stellar. And you had an employer who made a commitment to you just as much as you made a commitment to them. And part of the reason you made the commitment to them was because they made the commitment to you. Now, my question is, what commitment are you making to your employees? You're giving them insurance that stinks. You're giving them benefits that are, maybe okay. You're not looking out for their better interest. You're looking out for your bottom line. And, I'm a big believer in there's a way to do people over everything, to quote the Talent Champions Council and the folks out there. But it's really important to understand that profits are not what you want to focus on. Happy, well taken care of employees that aren't stressed by the outside stuff, that aren't other pieces, that's the key. That's really the key. And that's what I see all the time. What do you think? I mean, are you seeing the same thing with loyalty and expected loyalty when it isn't really being returned?
Well, I think loyalty, went by the way of the dinosaur about 20 years ago, right? As soon as they stopped and they shifted from that pension thing to a 401k, floating benefits, reserves. And then even if you're looking at it now, where these people that have left, the employers are spending all of their energy, like you said, their time and their dollars, and they're saying, hey, Andy, I know you quit, but oh my God, we need you. You had a few months, you did some stuff with the kids, you went snowshoeing, you bit snow forts. Great. Come on back. And you know what? We're going to pay you 1.7% of what we were paying you before because we're so desperate for you, rather than let's go spend some of that money to find some other people to fill the gap. And wait a minute, let's just pause first and think about what we really want to be and achieve as a company, because maybe this isn't working. Maybe this is the opportunity to really retool and get people dialed in and figure out what we want so that we can grow it together and with everybody aligned. Because my whole theory is that we now live in the world of the 10 billion competing agendas. It used to be before where there were like, I don't know, insert number, 100,000 agendas because there were 100,000 companies and we all worked for one of the 100,000 companies. And that was kind of our agenda, wake up, commute to work, do our thing, whatever, come home, feed the kids, feed, do the dishes, call it done. And now we're like, wait a minute, I've got my side hustle. I want my thing. I want to do this. And so now with 8+ billion people in the world and some of them doing 2-3 side hustles, there's 10 billion competing agendas.
Yes, indeed, there are.
So if you're the company that can figure out how to leverage the individuality of the people in their own agendas and find a way to make that work around your own, because you're trying to move your own forward, that's the magic ticket. And that's not benefits, because to your point, benefits suck. They absolutely do. Now, they may be better than somebody like us, like as a bootstrap startup. So when you're at like zero, it's, not hard to be better, but there's so much opportunity.
Well, there's a general concept that I've come across, and it's true in just about every aspect of our culture here, is American culture is reactive, not proactive.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also ready, fire, aim. It's also, forgetting to slow down to go fast. It's all those things sort of rolled up into one, not to be too cliche, but when companies are ready to slow down, when they're ready to take a look at what else they want to do, it's a really good idea to bring in people who don't, they don't think outside the box. They don't think there's a box, and they're willing to give you all the alternatives to what you can do. And that's, there's to your point of 10 billion agendas, there's a lot of people out there that can help. You want to find the people that know how to put the teams together that can help, the groups together that they've already helped vet for you. You mentioned bet on blue. Well, these days, blue itself is outrun by its own self. It's become a parody of itself in some ways. A lot of the large companies have, whether it's the big accounting firms, whether it's the big tech firms, whatever it is. And a lot of smaller companies are out hustling them and beating them out. But like you said, how do you find another company that's vetted all of it and you figure out where you go from there. So there's a lot of things out there like that. And that's what people should be looking for, and be looking to be proactive. And as you said, take the time to make the right decision. That's really what's key.
That's right. And you're like, preaching to the converted over here, as I like describe myself as word nerd, science geek, contrarian, bent on living outside the box. Right. I mean, this is the space I live in.
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm going to bring it back to soft skills and life skills and things.
Please.
Which one do you think is lacking right now across the board?
Which life skill or soft skill is?
Yeah.
I think it's actually it's interesting because we talked about loyalty before. I think it's a matter of respect, but I don't think it's respect of other people. I think it's respect of yourself that's lacking. I think a lot of times people blame other people for being disrespectful of them, when it's really the person's just not being all that respectful of themselves in a way of thinking about what their actions are going to do later. Ghosting is one of those issues that comes out of that. There's other things that are, and it's, I'm not even saying it's anybody's fault. It's culturally acceptable in a lot of ways for certain folks to just, that's how they've been brought up. I think the other thing is collaboration is another key soft skill that negotiation, collaboration, ability to talk about critical thinking, getting out of the way of confirmation bias and cognitive dissonance. Those all are pieces that have always been a problem, but I think they've become much more of one. And people are very definitive about black and white, up and down. There's not as much gray area. There's not as much middle or center as there used to be for people, and people aren't willing to meet there. So that's what I see. Again, there are solves for all that, and there are things that you can do in a very intelligent, pre-planned way that allow for the company to thrive instead of it being a choke kind of mechanism. And that's what I see happening for a lot of companies. They're choking on this because they just don't know what to do with it. It's like
So that's a great segue to my next question, which is, what is your message either for educators or for employers? Because at STEERus, we really support Gen Z. Like, we've got their backs. We're hearing them, we're supporting them, we're enabling them, we're empowering them. But we want to get that message sent over to their future employers and to their current educators. Right. What's the message?
Oh, well, I mean, as far as the current situation is concerned, it's look at the big picture in the future. Stop reacting to things right in front of you. Stop spending insane amounts of money on things that aren't actually going to benefit you. In the NFL, that might have worked for the Rams this last year. They made trades to win this year, and it worked. Doesn't always, but it worked. And that's what a lot of these companies are doing. They're leveraging their future against their now. And they're not thinking about what happens if it doesn't work. They're not thinking about, how do I do this instead of doing it this way? And again, there's a lot of ways to do it. And there's a lot of ways to hit the big fat reset button. I keep coming back to it, but it's a big change button or reset button. It's not an easy button. It's not like Staples. It doesn't mean it's easy. It just means there are ways to do it that don't cost your company money, that you can pay for all of it out of found money, and the programs pay for themselves over time. And they reset everything in your company. Everything. And it's amazing when you get the flow going and you get somebody who gets it. And that's the other part, is bring in visionaries, bring in people who can think beyond the border. That's the other piece of advice I would have, is that's the message. Get out of your own way by bringing in people that think differently than you do to expand the horizons, whether that's staff, whether that's consultants, whether that's other companies, whatever it is. Don't be afraid of the edge of the cliff. Don't be afraid of getting out there. Because again, you just mentioned the Gen Z, side of things. Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen Alpha coming into the workforce, they all expect authenticity. And that would be my last point. Be authentic. Don't lie. Don't shade. Don't, mirror, try to do smoke and mirrors. It will bite you in the butt every time. Every single time. It might take a little while, but it will get you. And you'll all of a sudden have a mass exodus. I just watched this happen with the company. They came to us and basically said, help. And we got into finally talking about what the problem was. And essentially, they had, to put it nicely, they had misaligned their mission values and everything else with who they had hired, basically telling people they were something they weren't. And then when it came clear that they weren't that, the people left. Imagine that.
Yeah, well, that's just it, right? You set yourself up for failure with that level of incongruence, right? And then it breeds dissonance and all that sort of good stuff.
It was a mass exodus too, Laurelyn. It was fast, it was brutal, and they lost a lot of, as you put it, oh my God, that person held the keys to the kingdom. There were 4 or 5 of those people that left all at once. Bye, gone. Wow.
Yeah, that's there's a company to recover.
They've got a chance to make it, but they're gonna have to work hard.
Yeah.
But
nothing's impossible. And last question before we wrap up, because this has been fun. The world needs more what?
Compassion and empathy, I think, right now more than anything else, because not only do we have war going on in Ukraine and crazy people at the helm of various places, but I think there's so many things that are happening to people on a personal level. And it used to be personal and work didn't commingle, and you could get mad at people on the work level because there wasn't empathy, there wasn't compassion, there wasn't caring that way, there wasn't grace. Those things, I think, are more important now. Almost every time if somebody misses something, you find out that they weren't ghosting you. Their mom was in the hospital, or their dad had COVID, or their coworker had been hit by a bus. It's almost always not about you. and it's almost always not directly just about them, is what I've come to find. And you've got to give that leeway. I think that's the biggest thing. The world needs more compassion, love, and understanding. So to quote, what's so funny about peace, love, and understanding? Thank you, Elvis Costello.
Yes, there you go, right? Well, I can't top that. I mean, that's a great way to wrap the show. So with that, I want to say thank you again, Andy Greider, podcast host of Unique This Week and co-founder of Domestic Growth Capital. So if you're a company out there and you're like, oh my God, we have no money, we have no budget, they find it. They work through magic, through your healthcare and all these other investments, and they find you money that you can then use to invest in your corporate culture and hire more talent and the talent that you want. That's how this works.
I was going to say, we even let you behind the curtain.
Woo! Woo-hoo! It's like Oz, woo-hoo-hoo, right?
Well, I don't know if it's quite that special, but anyway, thank you so much for having me here, Laura Lynn. This has been a hoot. And, again, I'm so incredibly thankful, not just for you having me on the podcast, but having you as somebody that we get to work with. So thank you.
I think so too. Great stuff. All right, audience, go out there. Have a good rest of your week. Stay tuned. We're only like, three weeks away from spring and flowers coming up. Like, woohoo.
Crazy fun.
All right. Bye, everyone.